On the 25th of January 2018, a commuter train derailed outside Milan in Italy, killing 3 people and injuring 100 others. It travelled for almost 2 kilometres after first derailing and eventually crashed into overhead line supports, causing severe damage to several carriages. Remarkably, CCTV cameras at Piotello station captured the train moments before the crash. As the train speeds through the station, sparks are seen from beneath some of the carriages as the derailed wheels grind along the rails. Moments later, beyond the view of the camera, the train crashed. Investigators determined that a worn-out section of track had broken beneath the train, causing some of the wheels to leave the track. As I said, the train then continued at full speed for almost 2 kilometres before the final impact. On the 6th of February 1991, a catastrophe was narrowly avoided in Smiths Falls, Ontario, thanks to the quick actions of both crews and a little bit of luck. While assembling a freight train, a Canadian Pacific crew had backed onto the main line without first confirming that the track was clear. However, Via Train 43 was approaching from Ottawa to Toronto at around 150 kilometers per hour. As the Via train rounded a blind curve and spotted the other train, its crew had just 1.3 kilometers to react, and the engineer applied the emergency brakes. At the same time, the Canadian Pacific crew put their train into reverse. Believing a collision was inevitable, the engineer of the passenger train jumped from the locomotive just before it stopped. Thanks to the emergency braking, the freight train reversing, and just enough remaining track, the 2 trains narrowly avoided what could have been a devastating head-on collision. Interestingly, winter may have been the biggest help. With no leaves on the surrounding trees, the Via Rail crew was able to spot the other train sooner than they otherwise might have. On the 14th of June 2006, one of the most infamous examples of a head-on collision captured on camera unfolded near Kismet, California. While one of the crews managed to escape their locomotive before impact, the other crew were trapped inside the wreckage with serious injuries. The southbound BNSF freight train should have stopped at the red light at the end of the main line and waited for the oncoming northbound train to enter the siding. Investigators later confirmed the signals had been working correctly, but the southbound crew claimed the red signal was hard to see due to sun glare. But a reenactment found that sun glare would not have been an issue. While some have speculated the engineer may have briefly fallen asleep, the official conclusion was simply that the crew of the southbound train had failed to obey the stop signal. Realizing a collision was unavoidable, the crew of the southbound train jumped from the cab. With almost no time to react, once they realized the southbound train hasn't stopped, the northbound crew, whose perspective we see the video from, dropped to the floor and braced for impact. While the southbound crew escaped mostly unscathed, the crew of the northbound train were not so lucky, suffering several serious injuries, but in the end, everyone survived. On the 27th of February 2026, a tram derailed in downtown Milan, Italy, before crashing into a building. 2 people lost their lives, including 1 pedestrian, and around 50 others were injured in one of the city's worst recent tram accidents. The tram operating on the busy Line 9 was travelling through central Milan shortly after 4 p.m. when it failed to stop at a station then entered a left-hand curve at excessive speed. The tram left the tracks, struck a traffic light, and then slammed into the side of a restaurant.
È vivo? Il rider? Porca puttana. Non arriveremo mai, dobbiamo scendere.
Police learned the driver had missed a stop moments before the crash and was on a phone call until just 12 seconds before impact, although his lawyer argued the call had already ended by the time the tram crashed. The driver later stated that he had felt unwell and lost control. Investigators examined why the tram's automatic emergency braking system had failed to prevent the accident. As this is a relatively recent event, investigators have not yet determined the exact cause. Several possibilities remain under investigation, including the driver's condition, his actions leading up to the crash, and why the tram's automatic braking system had failed to react.
È vivo? Il rider? Porca puttana. Non arriveremo mai, dobbiamo scendere.
This final clip is a bit of an oopsie, and thankfully no one was seriously hurt. On the 28th of June 2015, at around 11:20 am, a suburban passenger train was arriving at platform 3 of Churchgate Station in Mumbai, India, as it completed its journey. At first, the arrival looked normal. However, as the train reaches the end of the platform, it suddenly fails to stop, derailing as it comes to an abrupt halt. Several carriages lift noticeably, and passengers begin making their way off onto the platform. 5 of the train's occupants suffered minor injuries, but no one was badly hurt. So, what had happened? The train had overrun the end of the track and crashed into the buffer stop. After investigation, it was determined that the driver simply hadn't applied the brakes in time. That's all for today's video. If you found value in it, I'd love it if you subscribed and joined me for the next one. To watch another of my train crash videos, you can click the link on screen. And as always, thanks for watching.